What's up, you Sir Junkies? I'm your host among hosts, Cole Adam Davis, and welcome back to another episode of Absurd Curiosity Podcast. For those of you who are new, welcome. We must talk about science, technology, medicine, really pretty much anything that interests us and we want to learn about. But the most important part is that we laugh and have a great time while doing so. The conversation you're going to hear is like kind of a big step from our normal, which, now that I think about it, I say that a lot on here. It seems like every episode is a different step from the normal. This episode is with Dr. Joe Davis. He's a Ph.D. in apologetics, and just so you know, apologetics, I didn't know this, is basically God's lawyer. Basically, they just go through and they try to prove the work of God. And what we talk about in this episode ranges from like morality, is religion real, psychedelics. It gets pretty interesting. This episode shares an example of what it is like to have a polite, funny, and very enlightening conversation with somebody that shares different views. This podcast was incredibly amazing to make and even edit. We hope you enjoy it. Thank you for watching. So, thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Joe Davis. We're so glad to have you on. Steven, whenever he originally introduced the idea to have you on, he was like, look, you got to bring this guy on. He's pretty much like God's lawyer, and we have to just bring him on. So I'm curious. I've never been really a religious person myself, and I'm not sure if Sean has either. So, and I want to state this, I don't hate on religion, and I was actually very welcoming to the idea of learning a little bit more about somebody that defends Christianity. Very interesting name. Steven told me that it's called apology. Is that?
Apologetics.
Apologetics, okay. Now, how good are you at apologizing? I'm pretty sure you've heard that so many times before.
So I would hope you would be pretty good
at it, yeah.
Let's just say I enjoy it greatly. How about that? And how good I am, who knows? I don't know.
Or did you mean apologizing?
Very good at apologizing, yes. I've been married 37 years, and I've mastered the craft.
So, in an email you sent us, you want to talk about a boys' home. And I didn't quite get to read the full email, but what is that about? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me talk about that before we get to more cerebral things. I teach ethics class, as well as philosophy and theology and things like that, but one of the things I teach in ethics is that real ethics is not merely just the theory, but there has to be praxis, or there has to be activity. Mm-hmm. And, instead of just teaching about it, I decided to do something. It sounds like a strange concept, I know. I run an orphanage for people who are orphans in the true sense of the word, mm-hmm. or worse. And what I mean by that is children who have been removed from their families because of abuse and neglect.
Oh, okay.
And so 86% of the boys that come to us have been sexually abused.
Oh, wow.
And the rest as a result of neglect. And the stories are we hear about these things in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. I get the children that you read about in the newspaper that are neglected, and their parents are going to jail, basically. And so I had a couple of boys come to me my first year I was there. Their parents had been shot dead right in front of them.
Jesus.
So they had no family. Yeah. So their family, there wasn't anybody that wanted to take them in. And so they came to us. So we get children who are orphans in the true sense of the word, or have been removed from their families because it is unsafe. And so our job is to, if possible, reunite them with the families. But the reality is, in many instances, they're not able to be reunited. And so they will grow up at this boys' home. And when I came on board, I asked a question, and I'm so glad you're letting me talk about it, because this is something I didn't know anything about, truthfully, until I got into it. And it's such a big need in our society. And so I said, what happens to the boys when they turn 18? Which seemed like a reasonable question. And they said, well, we wish them well. And I was like, what do you mean you wish them well?
Yep,
what
that's
what
mean? Happens.
And the answer was they dropped them at a homeless shelter. And so for your 18th birthday, you get to be homeless.
Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Much.
And so I told them before they hired me, if you hire me, we're going to have a transitional house because I can't figure out for the life of me why you would raise boys to be 18 to throw them on the street. Now, the statistics on this are that, according to University of Chicago, 44%, almost 50%, of children who turn 18 in foster care will be in jail in 2 years.
Wow, that is a large portion. Now,
but if you think about it, it makes perfect sense because if you're going to make people homeless, what are they going to do?
Yeah, they got to fend for their own,
Well, what are they going to do? So I told them this, and they hired me anyway. I'm glad to say after being there for 8 years, we now have 3 transitional homes, and I'm looking into buying a 4th one.
How many kids are you bringing in at a time?
Well, it fluctuates because sometimes they're going to be reunited with their family. So it fluctuates anywhere from 6 to 19. And then in our transitional houses, they're all full. It's as many as zoning will allow us to hold. And the fire department, I should say. That by the way, is a sore subject. But anyway, now the really good news, and thanks for letting me talk about this. The really good news is of the children that come to our transitional house who have no family, only 14% will have a high school diploma or GED because of the trauma that has occurred in their life. Many of them haven't gone to school for years when they come to us. And so by coming to a transitional house, what occurs is that they have the ability to graduate. And so our graduation rate from high school is over 90% after 5 years of doing this. And here's the real interesting one, 50% of those will go on to college.
That is absolutely great. Do you help them get scholarships or anything? Or they just they say, well, or they reach out and get it for themselves?
Cole, it's a great question. Now, in the state of Florida and probably other states too, they can go to school at a state university or community college for free.
Really?
Now, that sounds really good, but remember what I'm saying. These are children who don't have a family. So while you can go to class for free, you don't have anywhere to lay your head. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, sometimes I sit back and I go, who thought of all of this? This is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Because nobody's going to school if you have nowhere to sleep. Mm-hmm. And so the bottom line is by providing housing for them, they now have the opportunity to be able to actually go to college. And so it's really such a simple solution, frankly. And yet, I don't know. I'm not really sure why no one's thought of it.
But before?
I'm sure there's other people that have thought of this.
How do you fund that?
Yeah, great question. So we're going to get about 50% of our funding from the state, and they're going to give us a rate. We all know, or they know and we know, that in fact, that's not going to cover the costs. And so I asked them one time, how are we supposed to do this? I mean, am I supposed to make gold out of straw here? How does this work? And they said, Dr. Davis, you have a Christian organization. Go ask for money.
Wow. So they're pretty blunt about it.
Oh, they're absolutely blunt. They're like, ask for money. And I'm like,
and then your return is, well, what about the separation of church and state?
Oh, Lord, have mercy. Yeah, it's just unbelievable. Now,
it is when it's convenient, right?
It's just crazy, really. I mean, it's just crazy. And here's the thing I tell people. Look, you're going to pay somehow, some way. If these kids don't actually get into a transition house, you're going to put them in jail, and you're going to be paying for the rest of their lives.
And the cost of jail for years.
And then people don't realize the cost of free health care that gets handed out because they go to county hospitals once they're homeless, so they get sick or anything happens, and then the county just writes that off. Well, that's another part of the local taxpayers' money that goes to that person because they know they're not getting paid for it, but they have to treat them.
It's just absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane, and we know the statistics. Like I say, it isn't like we're guessing. Gee, what might happen? The answer is approximately half will be in jail in 2 years. So it's like,
2 years,
so you're going to pay for it.
Yeah.
And so, it's just, sometimes I just wonder who is making up this stuff. I mean, seriously, are they doing Quaaludes? What's going on?
Quaaludes? I haven't heard that in a long...
They would be probably a lot more mellow if they were doing Quaaludes.
Quaaludes.
But so we would only hope that our politicians would do quaaludes. I think we would have a lot of peaceful society. But
I'm just like mystified. Okay, go ahead.
And then when you house them in prison, you're paying enough that we could actually pay for them not to be homeless. Like we could give them a home instead of putting them in prison.
Right.
Why not stop them from going altogether? You know?
Right.
Why not create programs where we can just sort of stop this turnstile?
Well, I mean, I think it goes to for-profit prisons. I mean, there's a reason that we funnel people into prisons is because it puts money into lobbyists and politicians' hands. You know.
Like I say, I have no idea who thought this would work. So anyway, thank you for letting me talk about it because it's a big deal in our society. I can't for the life of me. So here's a statistic. I will give you one more. On death row in the United States, 8 out of 10 are foster care children.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense.
So
Holy cow.
Totally makes sense.
Hey, let's stick to your projects for a second. So there was another one that I read about you go like a pilgrimage kind of story kind of thing, like an adventure, a Christian adventure.
Always wanted to do that.
Yeah. The answer is again, it sort of fell in my lap. I take tours of Israel and Palestine, which of course right now is sort of a little hot.
It's a great vacation point right now.
You can say that.
There's actually a guy that buys all his vacations around war zones and like catastrophes, so he can travel the cheapest that he possibly can.
Yeah, I remember that
he's
guy.
On the streets while it's just rubble everywhere, drinking his Mai Tais and.
Yeah, well,
he
should come to
disaster travel. They call it disaster travel.
Yeah, so I lead trips to Israel and into parts of Palestine, depending on how things are going. Right now, unfortunately, I had to cancel all my trips, but totally awesome. And part of my background educationally is I was not only a philosophy major, but a history major. And so, oh my golly, you go there and you're looking at a gate that's 3,750 years old that Abraham probably walked through. I mean, it's like, what? It's only how old? 3,700 years? You know, it's like crazy stuff. And it's just, for me, it's sort of like, wow. Oh, wow, this is really good.
Have you ever seen the pyramids?
No, I haven't. I've been tempted many times to go because I'd love to see the pyramids. However, every time I think about going, I run into somebody who's been there who says, don't go. They'll tell me, you'll love the pyramids and hate everything else.
I had a cousin that went, and whenever he went, he took pictures of the pyramids where they look all beautiful like you normally see on the internet. But they also have a dump right next to the pyramids. So all the trash is like floating everywhere. So like he would have to pick up trash before he took a picture of the pyramid.
I have heard similar stories, and I've heard, basically it's just not a nice place to visit. And I love history. I've gone, quite a few places. I've been very fortunate. I'm disappointed, and I'll probably go anyway at some point. They basically said, if you go with somebody who who knows the lay of the land. Yeah.
Speaking of the Egyptians, and they have different religious beliefs, or at least back then they did. What are some of the religions that you dabbled in? Did you ever dabble in any other religions to like learn about it and say, okay, which one's best for me, or what do I think is right?
Yeah, I didn't approach it in that way. In other words, sort of in a systematic, comprehensive way. I was raised in a Christian home. I was not a Christian for really all of my growing up.
Really?
Just the opposite. Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, just the opposite. I could not have been more anti-Christian, I guess is the way to say it.
You think it's a rebellious phase?
No. Okay, I'll tell you. My mind thinks in a very, very sort of cut and dry way. And so it was real simple. Is there morality? Well, is there a God? I could not think of any reason to be moral unless there was a God. Immanuel Kant says the same thing, and so does Nietzsche, actually. And actually, Nietzsche is one of my favorite atheists. Truly the truth. I think he's brilliant.
Yeah.
However, he and I came to the same conclusions, and I can't fathom morality without God. That one doesn't make any sense to me. And so, in my critical analysis, basically, I just sort of was thinking, okay, so how do I want to do this thing called life? And I think in my case, one of the things that happened to me, Cole, was I was actually a pretty good baseball player, even though I'm small for baseball.
Hey, same
When
here.
I
I'm
was,
5'7".
yeah. Well, I'm 5'11", but as a
And with the
pitcher,
hair, maybe, yeah.
with the hair, I'm 6'2". But when I was 15, I could throw 85 miles an hour, and so I was sort of on the chart for just interested. Truth of the matter is, probably everybody knew there was no hope because I was too small, and they were right. What happened is I blew a muscle in my back, actually.
Ooh.
And I met with the Orioles team doctor, and he said to me, some people are meant to play ball and others aren't. You're not one of them. And around the same time, I was in a car accident. And it really is like they say. Have you guys ever been in a car accident?
Minor ones. I've
Not
never
a
been in a
minor,
big
just
one.
minor.
Yeah, minor.
This one, the car ran a stop sign, and I was in the passenger seat. It was coming right for me. And when that happened, I literally saw everything in slow motion. That's not a lie. That when people say that, it's really true. And at that moment, I really came face to face with death,
Mm-hmm.
and it shook me. It shook me to the point where I began to re-examine everything. So, is this the way that I want to live? And from a critical standpoint, and even as in philosophy, I would go assault people with this thought. My philosophy professor, who taught ethics, I just walked up to him one day and I said, "Tell me why I shouldn't kill you." He's a little taken off guard.
Yeah, I think anybody would if you
Yeah,
brought it up
he's a
that
little
way.
taken off guard. And first he said, "Well, maybe your conscience might bother you." And I looked at him and I said, "Conscience is a cultural construct. It has nothing to do with right and wrong." And he said, "Yeah, that's true. That's true." And then he said, "Well, maybe someone will see you." And I said, "That's a pragmatic argument. That never establishes right and wrong. It's only wrong if I get caught, and the majority of people don't get caught who are smart, and I'm pretty smart."
It's funny. I was watching some just murder documentaries not so long ago, and I noticed the underlying theme for most serial killers was that they thought they were too smart to get caught, and then they got caught. So I don't know. I just found that interesting.
I have a theory on that, Cole. Of course, I have a theory on everything. We'll be here for 10 hours.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
I have a theory on that, and I think they get bored. And I think that they need more thrill. And as a result of that, they take more and more risk. And so what is relatively simple, not trying to to teach people how to do murder, by the way.
What's your background here?
Yeah.
It sounds like investing in the stock market. You start with stocks, you start dabbling, you go into options, and you're just betting it all. Now you're in crypto,
I think they just get sloppy. I mean, not all of them. Not all of them, of course, but I think they just start getting sloppy. They were like, okay, I'm so good at this, man. Maybe I can leave a arm out in the front lawn for a day or two. Who's going to notice? Like, I think they get sloppy.
Yeah.
There's just so many elite ones, though, that don't care, that just go and murder thousands of people all the time.
Of course, it's hard to tell because, it's a recent phenomenon that we're, tracking all of this. Probably years ago.
Imagine, hundreds of years ago, they just did it. Just killed
I think
the
they
crazy.
did. I think they did. So I walked up to my professor and I said, "That's a pragmatic argument. It doesn't establish right and wrong. It only establishes risk or reward." And he says, "Well, how do you know that I don't have a gun?" And I said, "You've used my argument. Might makes right. So please, do you have anything else?"
See, mine is like you sacrifice the ability to gain a relationship with someone. Like, I like building relationships with all kinds of people, like randomly. Like, I'll go to music festivals and meet 100 people that I go home and like text with and communicate with and that change my life. So if I was to just murder random people, that's one less person I can build a relationship. So that alone is enough reason not to just randomly kill people, because now I can't build a relationship with them.
Respectfully, I would disagree, and I'd give you a textbook example. We had a person who was a serial killer in Kansas who has had many relationships. His family never knew that he was a serial killer, and an upstanding person in the community. I mean, it's sort of like, if this is an upstanding person, what are we doing? But
Yeah.
the answer is he actually did have many relationships.
Who
Well,
was
it's
this?
not that they can't have. I mean, I'm not saying that a psychopath can't have a relationship. I'm just saying that is one driving factor that I wouldn't randomly just kill someone, is that they have I have an ability, I guess, to put my own consciousness in the foot of other people and think, yeah, I can brush by someone and just think forever about all the things that they do and experience and interact with. And so the sympathy, the empathetic reaction from that would prevent me from ever wanting to take someone's life, unless I was trying to defend my own. That's the
yeah. I think I think that's wonderful. I'm glad you're not a serial killer.
We know of.
Yeah.
But the simple argument around that would be neurology. And it would just simply be, I have an individual brain that predisposes me to certain types of behavior, therefore. And my argument with the professor was, by the time we're done, all that you've done is you've actually verified my argument, unless you can find a way around it. A lot of people go to the social contract theory, which I'm adamantly against. I can't, I don't want to fraud them out. What's the social contract theory?
Yeah.
It's the idea that we need each other for the betterment of humanity.
That's what I used to think. When I took your class, I remember my thought was, well, morality comes from the concept of, well, if we really want the best for society, killing each other probably isn't the way of doing it. So let's find out what works well, what doesn't work well. Killing each other doesn't always work well, so let's try to keep that one on hold until we need it. That would have been my rebuttal.
That's an interesting point, until you need it. And so then the question, if it's pragmatic, is what benefits me most? Or to put it another way, if it in fact increases my ability to survive, then it becomes a good thing. Mm-hmm. And let me give you an example. Let's say, Stephen, not that you do, but let's say that you have a very rich uncle who's left you everything and you found the will. Wouldn't it be better for you for him to die more quickly?
Unless he had a position, yeah, I mean... For most
again, by the time I'm done, you're going to think I'm a sociopath. As a matter of fact, my own daughter.
It's too late. You're already too late for that. You've already crossed.
Yeah, the FBI is already listening to this conversation.
Well, I would not be surprised. Anyway.
See, that's just one thing I've always had a problem with. I'm not religious, and I have my grandparents and things are preachers and all this, and they run around with snakes and speak in tongues and all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh. And I've just never got that whole needing someone looking over your shoulder to do good things. I want to do good things because I like to, and not necessarily that I do good things, but I don't necessarily go around doing bad things because I don't know. I don't need someone telling me all the time or to know that someone's watching me, this all-knowing being, to do good things. I could just do them.
It isn't merely a question of surveillance. It's a question of how do we define it. And so if morality begins with me or my brain, then it would be logical, I'll say it this way, that there not be any extension at all. In other words, if we have individual brains, then morality would be individualized. And even if we come together in a contract, the contract only lasts as long as I want it to. And the best example of that is the speed limit. The speed limit is a social contract. We are told, here's what society wants. You should drive 55. I'm going to tell you, no one hardly at all drives 55.
And in fact, if you do, you're getting ran over.
Right. So everybody invalidates the contract because it's individually appropriated based upon my desire. In other words, I decide what the contract says. I decide what's binding. And if morality begins with me and is tailored by me, then in fact, it merely is nothing more than a emotional, I like Mountain Dew.
Okay.
So is that what you think about when you look at a speed limit sign?
Not anymore.
When I look at a speed limit sign and things like that, and people going past it at 75, I think that this is more a tool of authority to selectively pull over anybody that they want to without bias and without probable cause. That's what I see when I see that. That is more systematic repression of our society. Yeah, systemic control.
Yeah, okay, but we could use numerous examples. We could use income tax. as an example. And
Okay.
again, it's just sort of like people do what they want. And what is their only rationale for paying income tax? I'm going to say, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But 90% of the people, the only reason they would do it is
My
because of fear they get caught.
That's my motivation.
Yeah, no one would pay income
That's
tax,
it.
and in fact, everyone cheats on their taxes in probably some level or way.
It makes-
and in fact, it's a parody that everyone cheats on their taxes. I mean, it's one of those things like speeding. Like everybody speeds, everybody cheats on their taxes. It's not that like I think that mostly that you don't cheat on your taxes, that no one knows how to freaking do their taxes, and they made it this amazingly complicated.
Yeah,
Like I
I'm going to
paid
give you
tax
that.
back
I'm going to give you.
100.
Yeah, you're punishing the
So-
government for its obstinacy.
And I pay
It's
for the
invalid
maximum
if you do it.
protection through those agencies. Like if I get audited, it's on you. You're the one. I don't know what I'm doing over here. I'm just clicking buttons on the internet.
So all the way back to Cole's question, I was quite systematic in my approach and trying to think it all through. And I was a philosophy major, so truthfully, that helped a great deal. When I went into philosophy, a lot of my Christian friends said, "You're going to lose your faith, and you should run," because they asked really hard questions. I was like, why would I lose my faith because I asked hard questions? And I thought to myself, frankly, if I'm going to lose my faith, I'd actually sort of like to lose it early.
Yeah, let's ask those questions right up front.
Yeah.
You chose Christianity for more of like a moral rule book, so somebody else, some
I'm gonna say
omnipresent
no.
God, can hold the actual contract. So that's your reasoning behind it, not so much that I agree with everything Christianity says or everything in the Bible says. It's more of, for you, I have to be good because of this person will be the rule bringer.
Yeah, no, not really. As a matter of fact, I'll say it a different way. This whetted my appetite to investigate.
Okay.
In other words, the cerebral aspect created a question and quandary for me. Is there any reason that I should do good? Is there any logical reason for me to help other people other than an emotive reason, which did not appeal to me? And is there anything out there, or in the words of like Einstein, the most incomprehensible thing, he says to me, is that the world is comprehensible. And so I began to sort of think along these lines, and it took me months of thinking about all of this before I came to the decision that I really did believe that there is something instead of nothing. Or to put it another way, that the order in the universe, and I love to talk about this discussion because there's been a lot of not so good, how should I say, I think not good thinking on this. The order in the universe, and not just our world, the universe, was compelling. And this is the pathway that also a number of people who have become Christians recently, who are PhDs, have taken. For example, Alistair McGrath, biochemistry PhD, and became a Christian. He's famous for the statement, a little bit of science will make you an atheist. A lot of science will make you a theologian. And so also, one of the interesting ones, Alfred North Whitehead, is from the Vienna Circle of Philosophy, an analytic philosophy. And so he comes to faith as a result of mathematics. And he just says that. The math is overwhelming. And Francis Collins, head of NIH, is another one. I don't know if you know Francis from Decoding the Genetic from Genetics. But he was raised in an anti-Christian home. I think that'd be the way to say it. Religion's stupid, okay? He was raised in an anti-Christian home. And so it was really through him looking at biology that moved him to an understanding of complexity, which boggled the imagination. And so he wrote a book called The Language of God, talking about DNA.
Well, let me ask you this: if you got a
Sure.
if you got a different genetic dice roll, say doing it all again, you got a different genetic dice roll, and you were born into a Muslim family, like religious and all this, Muslim, do you think you would have been a Muslim and you would be practicing in that faith?
Well, I agree with you. I think that our context creates the ground for our questions. And so the answer to your question is, if I was born into a Muslim family, I would probably think as a Muslim. I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt the power of culture. I don't doubt that. However, at a certain point, as one becomes aware as to what the questions are and what the options are, I think at that point, I'm not sure that I would, I'll put it another way. I'm not a Muslim, so it'd be hard for me to, I'm trying to be nice about this. I could not be a Muslim based upon uh, the history. Well, let's just say the history of it all.
Okay, so
The more I became aware of it.
I have a since you said actually I had two things. You said that you couldn't become a Muslim because of the history, and that got me thinking.
Yeah.
Well, what about the Crusades? What about all the
Yeah,
things
this
the
is a very good
Catholic
point.
Church had done,
Yeah.
pillaging through
yeah,
all
you're
these
right.
different things? Please,
The Native
please.
Americans.
Yeah.
Well, and of course, I would never think of the people killing Native Americans or even the Muslims as understanding their faith. And that's the distinction I would make, Cole, to your answer. There's a big difference between Jesus going around saying, love your neighbor as yourself, and Muhammad drawing a sword and quartering people and raising an army to conquer nations. Act like Christ. But that would not invalidate Christ.
You were talking about a geneticist. I'm not. I didn't
Yeah.
get his name. I'm sorry. I was too lazy.
Francis-
I was listening to your
Francis-
overall. You said Francis who?
Francis Collins.
Okay, Francis Collins. He was talking about DNA and that how DNA brought him back to, God being there. I've taken many classes in genetics. I've done cancer research. I came up with this question looking at DNA. And I'm not a religious guy. I said, if this is truly God's language, like you said, or DNA is a form of God's language, if God truly made us, then why wouldn't he understand our flaws and not allow us into heaven? If he truly made us, he should understand the faults. If he was truly the engineer, he should understand that, well, humans can't do this well under pressure, or, like a structural engineer, right?
Yeah.
They know there's a limit to where this metal can bend or break. If that makes
I
sense.
agree with you wholeheartedly. I would say I think he does, and there's lots of scriptures that actually talk about God knowing how frail we are, and we're like dust in the wind, and thanks to quote a Kansas song, but yeah, I think he does actually, and as a matter of fact, I have great hope in that because I'm sort of like, gosh, if God loves me, then there's a lot of hope for a lot of people, and I do think he understands our flaws, and as a matter of fact, I would say that even getting into a deeper area, like with suffering and things like that, I think that the process itself has some value. However, I would never say that in fact that we're created perfect. I think that we're created flawed, in all honesty. I think when you ask the question, well, how could a good God create that? You're basically asking, forgive me for getting into philosophy, but you're asking how can imperfection come from perfection? And the answer is it can't unless it is a process which ends in perfection.
So, kind of like a lot of developers today in operation software, it's not a bug, it's a feature.
So where do we submit bug reports? Hey, so to prepare for this podcast,
God is okay with being bugged.
He's okay with the bugs. It's a feature, not a bug. Prepare for this. I read some stats because I am not religious. I mean, I'll just say that. And I think most people that know me probably know that I'm not religious. Not that I have anything, like Cole said, I'm not against religion. Like I just don't. I've always been like, it's like laughable to me. I'm just like, wow, that I don't get it. Like it just doesn't even register for me why someone would want to do it, but not to bash it at all. It's cool, and you're a very interesting guy, and so it seems like it's a cool passion. But to prepare for this, I read some statistics and stuff just to kind of understand, because I feel like religion's probably on the decline, and kind of read PRI, and through most religious denominations, we're seeing a decline, except for religions like Mormonism. That one's actually grown amongst all of the Christian religions. And then I read some things about there's more like it's more popular amongst poor and uneducated, more popular amongst Republicans and people that seemingly have degrees and all this, and they're educated and that vote Democrat. They're not religious. Why? What is that about?
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain
Uh,
or set me
Yeah,
right on
sure.
that.
It's a very, very good question. And I would say that part of it would also be even more frightening if you'd have done this survey in 1730. Because what we know, yeah, and what we know of the American colonies is that it was a cesspool. American colonies were an absolute cesspool. Were there some nice people? Sure, but they're the exception. I mean,
Well, I mean,
we're
when
talking
we literally started America to break away from religion, so we could have our own religious
Yeah,
thought.
I'm going to say to that, Sean, that's a misnomer and only true for a couple of colonies. Okay, the majority of colonies are in it for money. Okay,
Money, yeah. Well,
and so
money's always the overriding factor in anything. I mean, and I think that's why I see a lot of religions as a
well,
veil for money.
yeah, but of course that's certainly not true for Mother Teresa. I mean, the people that work with
Oh,
me at
there's
the Boy
you
Scouts.
can't say it. Nothing is in absolutes. I mean, nothing.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
obviously an example of
Sure.
the charity work, and there's obviously great things. And that's what I was talking to Coley about the other day. I love a lot of the things that religion do, like
Yeah.
missionary work and traveling and youth, care and all these things, all these cool things. It's just the whole God thing. It's like what? that's just me.
Yeah,
But,
well, see, it's for me, and I worked it just the opposite, Sean. I was sort of like came to the conclusion none of this makes any sense at all unless there is a God. And I actually came to the conclusion going, how can I possibly explain all of this? And one of the funnier statements, just to give you an example, because of course this is my area, I have to study on it. I remember hearing Daniel Dennett when interviewed about the origin of the universe saying, the most logical explanation is that the universe just appeared. I thought to myself, yeah, I was walking the other day and a universe appeared. I was like, no, that is not a logical explanation in any way. I'm going to give credit to Stephen Hawking here. In his book, Brief History of Time, he says that if we can't solve the time curvature, the most logical answer is that there's a God. David Hume actually said this too. I don't know if you have familiar with Hume that much. Hume says this, I have never said that the earth is uncaused. Nothing could be farther from my thinking. Did he believe in God? No, but he left it as an open question because it was evident to him that there was in fact causality. And I think one of the things that comes up for me is I think it's very hard to explain. And I sometimes do this when I'm walking into a room to make a point. I'll ask the question, how did all these chairs get here? And people say, well, somebody brought them in, what have you. And I usually say, no, they just fell out of the sky and they fell in perfect order. That for me takes more faith than to believe that there's an orderer. And so that's where I begin in my presuppositions, I guess is the way to say it. It takes more faith for me to believe. Here, I'll give it another way. One of Nietzsche's interesting comments about all of this is he says, the thing that bothers me is there's not as much chaos. And here we might think of the adaptation of the species and things across the entire universe. Why are things not more chaotic? And his point is, if in fact everything is chaotic, there is no ordering, and it orders itself, then why are we not seeing more evidence of that? And I think that this is what the philosopher Whitehead said himself. He's an atheist. And because he's a mathematician, he goes, there's just too much math in the universe. Even Francis Crick, since we're talking genetics, you're familiar with Crick?
Yeah, Crick and Watson and Crick. Yes,
Yeah.
very
I have
familiar.
one right here. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. Crick says this about panspermia. He says, no, of course this didn't just sort of all develop by itself. No, of course not. And so when asked, well, then you believe in God? He said, no. I believe in other life. I believe that there's extraterrestrials. Mm-hmm. Now he's right, I think. So my point would be,
we have a topic on aliens we want to talk about.
Yeah, we have a topic on aliens that we're going to bring up in a minute. But
it's an alien conversation. But go ahead.
Hey, let me ask a question before you ask about aliens. Or is that what you're asking next?
No. I was going to ask about. He mentioned we can't figure out time curvature, and I didn't quite understand what you meant by that. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because
what I mean, of course, you're aware there's a tremendous debate about Hawking's ideas and the curvature of time. You're familiar with what I'm talking about with curvature of time?
Are you talking about the curvature of space-time and that how, depending on the mass
Correct.
in
Correct.
space, that bends? That's more, not so much Hawking, more Einstein, isn't it?
No, Hawking is absolutely talking about that.
Well, I mean, yeah,
No
yeah.
question.
He was building off of Einstein's theory.
Yeah. So you probably know as well as I do. He first receives acclaim as a result of singularity, the concept of singularity.
Yeah.
And he and Penrose basically said, "Look, all the data's going back to a single point. We're talking singularity."
Hmm.
After he did that, he said, "Look, I'm not lying to you. Look, you're with," and he says these words: "We are at a metaphysical impasse unless we can figure out a way around this," basically. And what he means by that is we're looking at something beyond the universe if we're talking about the creation of the universe starting at a single point.
Hmm.
Now, we could talk about this a tremendous amount. I love it. Astrophysics is one of my favorite things to read about. And he believed that the solution, I guess this is the way to say it, is the curvature of the space-time continuum.
Yeah. So current theories are that black holes are just a one singular point that is just so massive in weight. It's basically taking the sun and then putting in the space of a basketball. That mass is just absolutely huge. And you're right. I don't think we're going to find out what a black hole truly is until we're able to navigate the event horizon. And the event horizon, for people that are listening that don't know about it, is a certain point whenever you're getting close to a black hole that you just get sucked in. Light can no longer pass through. It's just a certain point that nothing can leave and or come. But we actually found out that wasn't true. Believe it or not, there's a thing called Hawking's radiation. Have you heard of Hawking's radiation?
Yes.
What do you think about that? Because there are stuff coming out of black holes that we know of. It's called Hawking's radiation.
I agree. Okay, there's lots of things to say. Okay. Number one, we're in the infancy of understanding black holes. It's like a black hole. Okay, sorry.
That's true. Okay. I mean, we don't know where a lot of the mass of our universe comes from.
Right, exactly. We don't understand dark matter. It's a dark matter, I'm sure. But anyway, we don't understand dark matter that much. So a lot of the things that we're thinking about right now, and I'm not trying to sound defeatist, because I love this area. I love looking into it, thinking about it, talking about it. I think we're in such an infancy. I'm not sure that anything we say will have any relevance at all. And a good example of this is quantum mechanics and gravity itself. It used to be thought gravity is a principle that cannot be superseded, it cannot be compromised, it is an absolute of the universe, and quantum mechanics prove that to be incorrect. And so I think that we're in such an infancy, it's hard to say, truthfully, what a black hole is. What I'm sure of, from a theoretical standpoint, and here's the only thing that I feel comfortable saying, basically, about black holes, is that in fact absolute nothing is a contradiction in terms, and the philosopher who said that, it was Martin Heidegger. Heidegger said all nothing is something, that absolute nothing is not knowable, nor can it be known. And so from a philosophical standpoint, I think that by the time we end up, we're going to find all nothing is something, or to put it another way, anything within the universe is within the universe. Not to sound tautological or redundant, but I think that's probably true. Did the universe begin out of a black hole? That would be impossible in my mind to say, because there's black holes in the universe.
So you don't subscribe to the mini-universe theory via black holes. So every black hole is another universe.
Yeah, no, I don't. And why don't I? Is because this is a theory. Again, we're trying to get to an infinite through a finite. And so it would seem very, very strange to me that we could do that.
Well, different infinities are larger than others. So there's infinities that are larger than other infinities.
Oh, that's where I would disagree. I think that is not true. I think there's a difference. Yeah, I totally disagree with that. I'm not trying to sound emphatic. I'm sorry.
No. I brought you on here to challenge what I have to say, and you ask me hard questions too, because I feel that you don't learn unless somebody really challenges you. And I don't think that
I agree.
most people today get on the internet and start hating at each other. I think what we're having here is a very, very constructive and peaceful conversation. I'm really enjoying this.
People get upset like crazy quick,
Wait for the comment section.
Well, and if I don't drink more Mountain Dew, I'm sure I'll be amenable. The concept. So I'll do quickly on that. I think that the concept of infinity and the different types of infinity is inaccurate. I guess that's the way to say
it.
What
about methodology as well?
Correct. Yes. And I think there's a difference between, and are you familiar with Zeno's paradox?
Maybe not the name, but maybe I'm familiar with the concept.
Okay.
Can you explain it?
This was a trick that a Greek philosopher played on people. And what he said is, I want you to go the entire length we'll use a football field for an example, a whole soccer field, football field, okay? And he says, but before you go the whole way, you got to go half. Before you go half, you got to do another half. Before you do another half, you got to do another half. And by the time we're done, you can't possibly travel at all, because in order to do that, you'd have to go halfway. In order to go halfway, you could never begin. And so it was
the reverse concept of radioactive half-life.
Yeah, good. So it was thought to be an unsolvable paradox. It isn't unsolvable, because what's occurring here is that the belief in infinity is basically saying that if we have everything, that we will never stop if we keep having things. But what occurs is there's a metamorphosis, metaphysically, from a finite to an infinite. And so by having finites, we get an infinite. And I'm just going to say, I think that's inaccurate. I don't think that that's possible.
Okay.
Let me put it another way. Where you begin is where you end. If you begin in finitude, you end in finitude.
Okay, that's interesting.
Nothing is forever, huh? Where were you before you were born? Let me ask you that.
My daughter actually asked me this question when she was sick. No, it's a funny story. She was a pre-med student, and bright young lady. But anyway, a funny story. I get a call I was a pastor for 19 years. Get a call from the Sunday school director. She says, Dr. Davis, I need you to talk to one of the kids in our church. I said, sure. What do you want? And she said she believes she's pre-existent. I said, really? I said, who is this child? And she said, it's your daughter. So I went to tuck her in good night. We'd have this ritual. I would sing to her. I would pray with her. I would kiss her on the forehead, and I'd say good night. And just as I was done, I said, listen, I understand that you believe you've always existed. And she's so cute. She's 6 and just as obstinate as her dad. I'm going to say that. Okay? And she goes, yes, that's correct. And I said, I was there when you were born. Why do you think that you've always existed? Now, she's a smart cookie. She said, because there's a God. And if God knew that I would exist, I existed in the mind of God before I was born. I existed in the mind of God, I have always existed.
Oh, this is 6 years old. Jeez.
She's a smart cookie. Let's just say she's smart. Okay. So I said, well, that makes perfect sense. I said, but I do not agree with you, because there's a difference between actuality and potentiality. And she says, you're not God. How would you know?
That's funny. That's funny.
I couldn't convince her. To tell you the truth.
Does she still believe that?
No, she doesn't. But it was a very sharp argument. And at the end, she said, we'll just have to agree to disagree.
So your 6-year-old basically had you going, shit, my degree. And it's come to nothing. Nothing.
Like this little kid, I will tell you, she was a lot of fun to watch arguing with other people. It was a lot of fun.
So,
anyway, so separate from the explain it to me like I'm a 6-year-old answer. What's your legitimate, what do you think? I mean, is it just something you just ignore and move on with your life, or what?
No, never.
Where were you?
Yeah, the answer to that question is never. And my wife will sometimes say to me, "What are you doing?" And I'll say, "Thinking." So no, never, no.
Just something you constantly ponder. It's just one of those open-ended.
Oh, there's
things.
lots of, which is one of the reasons, frankly, I like reading the astrophysics, because I think it's very interesting. I think it's fascinating stuff. It's actually built my faith up, as opposed to, again, like many things, instead of tearing it down, just the opposite occurred. And I came to many of the conclusions, frankly, that others have come to too, in astrophysics. Physics. Robert Jastrow wrote a book on this and said, we've been searching the universe, and we have some hard questions to ask, because we have to come up with a way around the singularity, or otherwise we got to say there's something that created this place. And so all of the concepts. Are you familiar with Vilenkin, since you know astrophysics?
Lincoln's no.
Vilenkin, Russian.
No, not right off the top of my head, but maybe I've heard about his stuff.
Yeah, he did an address at Stephen Hawking's birthday, and which he said the one thing that we know for sure is that we have absolutely nothing that we can prove that creates anything other than singularity. Now, he said that as Stephen's birthday, in spite of the fact that, Stephen's saying, yeah, look, we got it. But what everybody knew is that this was a theoretical attempt, and it's a good one. I'm not poo-pooing it in any way, shape, or form. But there is this idea that one has to accept what is unempirical. And here, mathematics becomes metaphysical, or another branch of philosophy.
So does Christianity support, or should Christianity support the Big Bang Theory?
Yes, they should.
But meanwhile, for pretty much all of my life, it's been like heresy.
I think it's got a lot going for us. Number one, I sometimes jokingly say this: a little group of runaway slaves came up with the most profound idea anyone's ever expressed: that time, matter, and space are finite, and they had a beginning. And that is true. There were not any other cultures during the time of that little Jewish group that ran away from Pharaoh that came up with an idea that time, matter, and space had a beginning. Everybody else is in cyclical time. They're all believing it's all just a big circle. We all go, what comes around goes around. This is big circle. They're all believing that. The Egyptians, all of them are believing in the circle. The Greeks come pretty close, frankly. We have a number of thinkers that come pretty close in Greek thought, but no one else. And frankly, we think that the Greek thinkers are after Moses at this point. So they come up with this great idea, and it's an accurate idea. I think that we've proven that time, matter, and space are finite. And again, this is, you're familiar with the fudge factor with Einstein?
No, sir. Can you explain it, or just give me an idea on it?
Yeah, he liked fudge, and he would bake it off. No, I'm just joking. Okay, so
where I was going.
It's a sickness. I tell people it's biological. There's nothing I can do. Anyway, prior to Einstein, of course, this is general theory of relativity. Prior to him, people were believing that, in fact, that the universe is eternal. And so it is Einstein's thought that sends that reeling. And what occurs? He realized that the math that he was doing to support the idea really didn't work. And in fact, he was sort of just tricking people with his mathematics. And so he realized it, and it bothered him. In the history of the world, Einstein was bothered by the fact that he knew the math wouldn't work. And so he had to come up with another way of doing it, which is the general theory of relativity. And what does he do? He begins with the premise that, in fact, the world has a beginning, and the time itself is finite in and of itself.
I never heard of that. I heard that he was working on multiple equations over and over and over again, and they would all come out wrong. And then he finally went back to this one that he started with in the very beginning, which is E equals mc squared, because he thought it was preposterous, and he came back to it. Is that what you're referring to?
Well, yes and no. Okay, yes, you're right. He struggles with it, tries to work it all through. Of course, he's like all physicists, he's struggling the whole time he's alive to think of these things. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. But he begins, when his early work does not begin, he begins with a static universe. And so it isn't until he does the math, and it's called the fudge factor, where he goes, I'm fudging this a little bit. I have to come clean on this. And what occurs is reworks it till he gets to theory of relativity. And so originally he was not thinking that way, because that was the norm. That was what people thought. People still think that, by the way. I mean, I'm not sound incredulous, but I think people still believe in a eternal universe, which just is not possible.
What do you think is going to be the end of the universe as far as physics go? Do you think there's like I've heard that it's a rubber band, it expands and it collapses itself. Do you think there is an end of the universe?
Well, before he answers that, I would like to answer it. I think it's going to be
Sure.
in a deep freeze because we're seeing that the universe isn't slowing down; it's just moving further and further apart.
Correct.
So
it's accelerating.
Yeah, it's accelerating from each other. So
Yeah.
if you look at any point in the sky, you'll see that it's moving away.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think it's just
true.
going to be a big freeze. Do you agree on that?
Well, I think the general theory is heat death, but my first thought I usually say is, I won't be here.
Yeah, that
Let
is
me
true.
know.
That is true. That is true.
I got
You
much
never know.
more close problems to deal with.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, you're right, Sean. I think there's much more pressing problems, even chemically, biologically for our world. I mean, if we're here. If we're here 500 years from now, I'd be surprised. I hate to sound pessimistic.
So you're talking about
During the
humanity
dark.
as a whole, or just us? Like in the conversation, or you think humanity?
Our biosphere.
Really?
Interesting.
You think we only have 500 years left?
I don't think we have that much, really.
I got to hear a little bit more about this. What leads it?
Well, well, lots of things, unfortunately. I'm going to get everybody depressed here.
No. Talk about it. I'm very optimistic. I mean, we have to pass a great filter. I'm not sure if
Really?
you. I see it as a challenge. That's
Well, it's a challenge. I agree with you. My first thought is, I'm sad to say that I think it's very easy for a nuclear holocaust.
I can agree.
I'm sorry. I think that's very easy. A simple
But
way to
total
say it would be-
eradication of all humanity is pretty far fetched. I think there would be pockets of survival. A total global eradication, unless we absolutely made the planet unlivable. But there's bunkers underneath the ground. People are going to get in there. Elon Musk and his group are going to be in a starship, heading off.
Right. You're right, Sean. I think
The two
that
richest
reason-
people in the world are preparing rockets to leave the planet. What's that tell you?
Right.
Yes.
I might know something.
Yes, Sean. Yes, Sean. I think that's accurate. And I hate to be pessimistic, but I think that having so much firepower to be able to destroy each other, there's just so many chances for it to occur. I mean, look at the United States history, Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, we're this close. And have you all read about the war games during the Reagan administration that Russia mistook as a actual attack?
I mean, we've actually dropped nuclear bombs on U.S. soil, and by a hairpin, like a very thin sensor malfunctioning,
Oh,
did that
yeah.
not go off and destroy
Yeah.
most of the eastern United States?
I don't remember about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not very public.
No.
It's not very public.
Didn't it land in North
But
Carolina?
it happened.
Didn't
Yeah,
it-
North Carolina.
It-
And they were flying
yeah.
sodium iodide crystals around to find them. I mean, they've
Yeah.
done that whenever a source goes missing and all that. But
Frightening stuff, really frightening stuff. And what most people probably don't want to think about or know is, it isn't like we're just talking about being able to shoot stuff from Russia or China. There's submarines off our coast fully armed with nuclear weapons.
Right.
And so the airplanes themselves are flying around constantly. I mean, I don't wish to sound pessimistic, but I would be surprised if we're here 500 years from now. I'm hoping that we have enough sense to make it a few years. Okay.
Do you think we'll end up on Mars?
Yes.
Or yeah. So okay, here's a good question for you. I don't think I initially posed this as a topic, but or even a question. But I believe it's in the Book of Revelation. It talks about a new heaven and a new earth, right? First, I mean,
I wonder
completely
that
having
myself.
part.
I know where you're.
Right. I mean, we're working very hard to get to Mars, and there's a lot of reasons that we can get there, and I don't know how if it's sustainable for a very long time, hundreds of years, thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years that we could be on Mars. But I mean, it points to the thought of what is this new Earth? What does that mean? Were they smart enough back in the day to think of means to get off of this planet and go, like? I want to hear some input on that too. That'd be
No,
interesting.
I don't think they were smart enough to answer very quickly your question. Do I believe that there might be something to it anyway? Yes, because I believe in God. I believe that there can be the possibility of revelation of beyond, or to put it another way, it's one of the reasons that I do believe in God, is that I think that in fact we do have instances of revelation that transcends our ability to know, even though it comes through human beings. Or to put it another way, through does not mean from. And so the fact that it goes through humans does not necessarily mean it's from humans. So do I think that there may be something there that actually is predicting not a good outcome for our Earth? I don't know. I mean, many people say, oh, it's just symbolic. If we all get blown to smithereens, I'll say it wasn't.
You're not the typical Midwest religious person that I've met throughout my entire life. So what is your denomination?
I'm Assembly of God, and so I am a Pentecostal. I do speak in tongues. I do pray for healing, all of that. Do I handle snakes? No. Do I handle snakes? I'd prefer them to never see me. Do I believe
sorry
in
I
the
said all that
supernatural?
crazy stuff at the beginning, because that's
No, I don't take any offense. Don't take any offense at all, Sean. Do I
I'm
believe
sure
in
you
the
heard it all.
supernatural? Yeah, absolutely. I do believe in
believe
it.
in ghosts?
And I have a different theory on what a ghost is. I don't
Okay.
really believe they're a disemboweled spirit. I believe that since angels can appear as humans, it would make sense that evil spirits could do so too. And I do believe there are such a thing as evil spirits too. I believe that we live in a spiritual world beyond our ability to see.
So you think there's like different like classes or types of ghosts and friendly
Yeah, I
ghosts, and
do.
evil
I
ghosts, and all
do.
this?
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, to go even further on a limb here, I think that some of the sightings that we have of aliens are actually beings
Spirits, huh?
that are, in fact, angelic in themselves.
I am so glad that we brought this up.
So these are people that didn't get into heaven or hell? They're stuck in between, or
No, no, it's no different than to answer your question. If you ask me, is there different species on Earth? Yeah, there's different species. Are there different species of spiritual beings? Yeah, be the same thing. In other words, I'm not a gopher or a frog. There's different species within the spiritual realm too.
So do you believe that like a Buddhist can have a different spirit being than a Christian?
Yeah, I do not believe in what's called the problem of the one and the many. Plato's illustration about this. In other words, I don't think that truth is subjective. Otherwise, it would not be able to be anything but that.
so there's only one
If I were to
correct
believe-
religion in all these religions? There's only one?
Yeah, I am saying that. I'm saying that, in fact, that I believe that there has to be a center or an absolute frame of reference. Or to put it another way, it's possible that we can both be wrong, but we can't both be right on opposing viewpoints. To use the logical analogy, A cannot equal non-A.
So
I believe that the fingerprints of God are on all culture. Sure, absolutely. I believe that God's
So what
fingerprints.
happens? So if one religion's right, and
Yeah.
all these people are practicing the wrong religion, do these people not get into heaven? Like, I mean, you're God's lawyer, so I mean, are these people not getting in, or they were all just going to be disembodied spirits?
Let's use a math analogy, and since I like math, let's do that. Okay, when you were taking algebra or trigonometry or whatever it was, you might have had this experience. I don't know if you did. But you might have thought you got the answer right, and you got your paper back, and there's these red markings on it. Maybe that didn't happen to you. But when the professor gets up and he says, look, you did a very good job, you tried very hard, except that was not the right answer. And so if you're asking me, do I believe that there's a correct answer? Of course, otherwise there's no answer. In other words, it's the same as mathematics and trigonometry. If you're saying to me that every answer is equal, well, then there's no such thing as trigonometry.
Well,
if
we're
you're
not
saying every answer is equal.
We're not saying every answer is equal, but do you believe that every person goes to hell because they just were bad at math?
Well, okay, well, that's a different question, though. That's a different question. And so your question is more, what happens to people who don't believe? I believe that everybody is going to come before God and will answer based upon the knowledge that they have. In other words, I don't believe that God's going to send people to hell that don't know anything about him.
So
I believe
So
that
it's going to be every person when they die, they have to debate to get into heaven first. Like, well, here's what. Okay, hold on, God. Let me explain myself first.
Yeah, no, not in any way, Sean. Not in any way. As a matter of fact, I don't think there'll be any debate at all. I think there will be a realization of what we actually know and don't know. In other words, if you say to me, Dr. Davis, do you know it's wrong to steal? Yeah, I think I do. Okay. Well, why did you steal? because I wanted it. And so I don't think that there's going to be a debate in any way, shape, or form, Stephen. I think what will occur is when we come before God, there will be a deeper revelation of ourselves so that we can see ourselves more clearly past the blinders that we have put upon ourselves for whatever reason. I can't tell you that, in fact, who's done what, okay? And here the scriptures are very clear. Don't judge other people. That's up to God. You let God do that. Okay? Why? Because we do not have enough comprehensive knowledge to make that call. Now, I can't go the other direction, though, and here's where my logical brain goes. Not that people aren't logical, but for me, I'm saying this would be impossible for me. If you said to me, like we were talking about, Cole, well, basically all religions are the same. I think that's not even possible. That's not logically possible.
You mentioned aliens. We never really got to get into it. And it's becoming a part of our podcast to cover aliens this time.
For some reason, aliens come up more.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. All right, I'm not trying to get. I'm not the person that's like. It's not. I'm not a person that's like woo 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 woo. Where aliens are here, they're probing every single person at Thursday at 9. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
I look at it. I mean,
actually, how do you know that I'm not an alien? No, I'm just kidding.
Well, so like I've had an email or two with Elon Musk, so I'm pretty sure. I know. I've talked to a couple.
I got. I'm just joking. Go ahead.
No, I was joking too. Yeah. Anyway, what are your feelings on aliens? So you mentioned that. So you saw the Tic Tac video. You saw. I'm hoping maybe.
Did you see the Tic Tac video?
Well, he didn't say the Tic Tac video. He said that like these UFO sightings were angelic. Right, so I wanted to probe a little bit deeper.
It's interesting that you use this word probing with the word alien in the same sentence. But go
ahead. Yeah, it's a past experience. So
go ahead.
I've always thought, if God truly made the Earth, right, he would be alien by like from that definition alone, because
by
an alien,
definition he would be an alien.
He would be an alien, right? Because he's not from Earth if he created it.
Yeah. Depending on what you mean by alien, I will disagree.
Okay.
Depending on what you mean.
Okay. Can you clarify? Yeah.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, Stephen actually reminded me of this illustration that I do in my class. I step into a trash can, and I say, God is not confined, and the creator of the box cannot be bound by the box or the trash can in this case. And so as I step in with one leg, I simply say it this way. If there is a God, then in fact, God must be a part of our world in order for our world to have any meaning at all. And in fact, the world cannot subsume or consume or in fact box God in.
You're basically talking about different dimensions at that point, right?
Well, let's not go there yet. That's another dimension. It's another dimension of the discussion. Anyway, so my point in this is that God must be both if there is a God. There must be a God who precedes and is not confined by, nor limited or defined by his creation. Or to put it another way, the creator of the box cannot be bound or defined by the box. Now, the deeper level is God in creation? And I would answer with the phrase, which I call pervasive omnipresence. But in fact, everything is connected to God, and it cannot exist without that connection, because he is the, how shall we say, the impetus in the whole thing. And that impetus is what, in fact, brings everything together. And here I'm getting really, really out there on a subatomic level.
Mm-hmm. Continue.
That's it. That's all I got.
Okay. So
I know you thought I was brighter, but I'm not.
Do you believe that there are other life forms that maybe God had created?
Yes, I do. Sure. Absolutely.
What is the reasoning behind that? Is it the scripture, or is it the mathematics of how many galaxies that we already know out there?
No, it's not that, because that's not really a good argument in and of itself. The probability argument is a horrible argument in logic. And I hear it all the time. It's just a horrible argument. Probability doesn't change so far as the number of times that we do something. If we have a 52-card deck, and I deal you with 52 cards, each time I use that deck, it has 1 out of 52 chance that you get the ace of spades. That doesn't change if I do it 10,000 times. Anyway, that's a little off the topic. Mm-hmm. But at any rate, your question is why would I believe this? And two reasons. Number one, I really think that some of the things that are out there are legitimate. I think that there are some things that appear to the casual observer. And granted, there's all sorts of conspiratorial theories, and I can even believe some of them. But I think that some of the things that we have seen demonstrates that there is, in fact, life outside of our universe. The difference between me and probably most people is I have a name for that. And I think they're celestial beings, and that there could be untold numbers of them that we have no knowledge of even. But I would still believe that they are created beings, and that in fact that they function, how shall we say, in this universe as a created being and not an independent being.
Interesting. Okay.
I'm trying my best.
What's the gender of God?
He doesn't have one.
Okay. So no sexual organs. He doesn't reproduce asexually.
No, not at all.
What are God's pronouns?
Yeah, well, now this is a different question. And you're like, well, we primarily call the God He, and you're absolutely
right. I mean, it's pretty much every time in the scripture he's mentioned as God the Father, right?
I agree with you that is the pronoun that is used with God. But if you're asking me, is God male or female? No. Why? Because even the scriptures teach this, that in the image of God He made them both male and female. Therefore, the characteristics in females must also be found in God. It cannot be one or the other. It has to be both.
So whenever I pray at night, I can't call God Big Daddy. I'm sorry. That was a terrible joke.
It doesn't bother me.
A lot of people believe, like, they get in a car accident and they survive. Oh, God was watching over me. Do you really think God would care on an individual level? That He spends all the time looking at each individual person?
Yes, He would have to. And the reason for that is physics, since we like physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In order for God to be able to do any one thing, every other thing has to be, in fact, factored into the equation, both in what happens and, to quote something that we call Molinism, He must also factor in all the possibilities and probabilities inherent in each situation. Anyway, I'm going on and on. The quick answer to your question is, I'll tell you a story. I was in a doctor's office, and the doctor said to me, "What do you do for a living?" I said, "I teach theology and ethics." And he said, "I believe in God. I just don't really believe He cares about me." I said, "Oh." He said, "Yeah." And I looked at him and I said, "It is illogical that a purposeful act of creation would lack purpose. And that God purposely creates, by definition, creation has purpose. What the purpose is not said, but it would be illogical that it would not have purpose if God purposely creates." He looked at me and he said, "That makes perfect sense." And I said, "Yes, it does. It'll be $75.
That's funny.
So what about people who are born with horrible birth defects? I mean, are they? I mean, that could be a can of worms right there. But,
no, it's the same question as imperfection and suffering, and I think that I think that there has to be some benefit, in an eternal sense, in order for any of that to make sense. And so if there is no eternity, then it doesn't make any sense at all. And by the way, I don't care if there's not an eternity. Why would I even care? But if there's an eternity, there has to be a benefit for those who, frankly, are going to get not as good a deal on this earth. And I think that that's true. I think there's people who don't get as good a deal on this earth. I mean, if you're born in Bangladesh, bottom line is you're not going to have as good a deal as people in the United States. And I think that there has to be some eternal benefit.
Okay, so we're coming up. We got maybe like 20 more minutes. So obviously, Sean wants to get on with investing, and I'm very curious to hear your answers too.
I just wanted to ask you, you're a really passionate, interesting guy. You know, I've definitely learned a lot. But usually with passionate, interesting guys, they also like to invest and usually are passionate about how they invest, and it's usually kind of intertwined. So how do you invest as a?
Okay, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to somebody today about this, and when I was a pastor, I didn't make much money. Okay, that's the reality. I didn't make much. On my very first year of pastoring, they couldn't pay me a salary, okay? So how did I survive? Through investments is the answer. My main form of investing is real estate. And the reason I like real estate is because there's not a whole lot of, I'm not trying to make it simple, but there's not a whole lot that can go wrong in a real estate investment. They're pretty safe investments and they do very, very well.
They do.
Real estate is, yeah.
Very good for laundering money.
Yeah.
Very good for laundering money. Maybe that's
I would
how.
not know about that, but I'll take your
I'm just messing around with
I
you.
also have stocks? Yeah, I have stocks. And the reason that I do stocks is because of the historical value of stocks and how they go up over
Do you
time.
choose your stocks on morality?
Yes, I do. I have some stories of losing money that way. And okay, so no, for example, I inherited Philip Morris, the cigarette maker. Okay, cigarettes kill 465 to 100,000 people in the U.S. alone per year. That and tobacco-related products. I felt it was immoral to support them, so I absolutely sold that stock. It went through the roof. So be it. You know, that's the way that goes. So a lot of my stocks right now are given over to basically someone who's going to do it for me. And I do dabble in it a little bit now, just because it's fun. That's probably the only reason, honestly. I like it.
Any crypto?
But no, I don't have any crypto. You might say, well, you should definitely be in that.
Shiba coin. Go deep into Shiba. You can buy 1 billion of them for like.
I'm one of the reasons I'm giving it over to investment people is because my life is kind of busy, and I have 3 full-time jobs, and so I just don't have time for it.
Well, I appreciate your time. We appreciate your time.
Definitely, I was gonna say that too. We definitely appreciate you coming out tonight.
You've been most kind. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's definitely. I've learned a lot personally, and you're definitely a much different person than Steven made you out to be. So.
Yeah.
Still harboring a grudge. He's still harboring over the exam.
Whenever he said you were the God's lawyer, we were like, well, shit, we're gonna have to break out all the scripture, really get down into detail. But tonight has been a really pleasant time for me. I've learned. I love learning people's perspectives. I often get pinged as weird because, like, one of the first things that I ask people, or during conversations, is like, so what do you feel about aliens? Like, do they exist? I don't ask them, like, are they probing people? I just ask them, like, do they exist? What do you think about the universe? Does it keep going?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a great way to get to know somebody. And I like your answers. For some, I don't agree on all of them, of course, but that's everybody. You can't agree with everybody. But I would be happy at the end of the day to shake hands with you and say we disagree, but I love that you're doing great in this world, and I would love to, continue to have you in it. I think you're doing amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. That's very nice of you, Cole. Thank you. Well, I have enjoyed myself. As you can tell, I enjoy this. I love talking about these things. And, it was great, Stephen. It was great to see you again. Haven't seen you since you walked out of the classroom crying, holding the midterm in your hand. No, I'm just joking.
So as you can see, he's doing terrible right now. No, he's doing fantastic. He's absolutely glowing.
I have no doubt. It's great to see you.
Can I ask one last question? You have an answer, obviously, for everything, especially when it comes to religion. Is there any question that's okay just to be a question and not have an answer to it?
Sure. There are questions like that. And one of the people asked me, and I tell them, I have no idea. So I'll give you 2 of them that I don't know the answers to, okay? And one of them is, what will we be like in heaven? I don't know. All I know is the scriptures promise us that it'll be better than here.
You don't subscribe to the fact that it could be tailored to each individual person. So, like, I'm not sure if
I do.
Okay.
I do subscribe to that.
Okay,
yeah, I do subscribe to that. Yeah, absolutely. But example, people ask questions like, "Will I have a big nose when I'm in heaven?"
That's interesting.
Well, my answer is I don't really know. What I know is you either won't care, and you'll be like, so what? Okay, or you're gonna have a great nose. I don't know.
That's awesome. But we always end our podcast with this question: is there any question or topic that we haven't brought up today that you think is very important that we talk about?
Were you asking me, Paul?
Yes.
Or who are you asking?
I'm asking you. Is there any topic or question that we haven't brought up today that you think is important that we bring up?
Oh, we've covered a lot.
It's a good question.
You did mention something about near-death experiences. I don't know if that.
Oh, yeah.
I thought we covered that.
I'd ask you that. What do you guys believe about have you seen the video of Pam Reynolds?
I can't believe no, I don't think so, I have.
Wasn't that the one turned out to be fake, though? Is that the same one I'm thinking of?
That's malarkey. Well, there's a bunch of them.
That's the same. There's definitely one that turned out to be totally fake, but I don't know if that was that one.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, malarkey is the name.
Seriously.
Yeah, no, I'm not making that up.
Oh,
the name
okay. I thought you were just telling another joke. I was like, that's malarkey. Okay.
Would I tell a joke? No, okay. Yeah, no, seriously. There was a guy named Malarkey who made this whole thing up, and they made money off of it. You know?
Well, there's a lot of snake oil products that you can make money off of.
Oh, of course. You can do that with anything. I mean, look,
Plus your body, in those cases, dumps all kinds of, psychedelic hormones like DMT or whatever that's
the DMT
cause,
right.
different experience.
Yes, DMT could be a possible explanation, but what I like about the Pam Reynolds one is that in fact she hears and relays the conversation of people other than herself, and that's what I find fascinating. In other words, yes, you're right. People could, your brain can create all sorts of things. But in this particular instance, the doctor gets on, and you can watch it on the BBC channel, or 2020 did a thing on her too. And the doctor gets on and says, there isn't any medical explanation. There's no biological explanation to explain how she heard a conversation. And here's the facts of the case. All of the blood is drained out of her brain.
So what I'm reading is she just experienced some anesthesia awareness, and all the stories that she claimed occurred before or after her flatline, and none of them were in her third party situation. But so I'm just reading some pushback on that.
Hey, Sean, except that's not what she says.
Yeah, I don't know the story. I just Googled it, and it's just the first. There's a lot of debunking of it already. So that's all.
Yeah, well, I'm sure of that. I don't doubt that. But I would say watch the video for yourself, because of course people are going to try to debunk it, because basically if you're going to go with that she heard anything in that state was done, saw, talked about. And then we've got a very interesting question going on. The other one is, what about Eben Alexander, a Harvard neurosurgeon?
I'm not sure. Not familiar.
Yeah, I would look that up too. And so if you're asking me, is there anything that we should talk about? I would, because I'm aware that DMT is an explanation, sure, of course. But Eben Alexander's book, which he calls Proof of Heaven, is very interesting. Why? Because he's a Harvard neurosurgeon. He's not, what can I say, informed about neurology. As a matter of fact, let's put it another way. He's about as good as it gets. If you're going to get somebody talking about a near-death experience, to get a Harvard neurosurgeon to say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you this stuff is real. And so, sure, of course, DMT is an explanation. But he has some stuff that he writes in there. And at the back of the book,
he was also, I'm reading, I just Google it, and then the first thing is saying he hadn't practiced in over a year, was facing $3 million in malpractice lawsuits, and then he used this to propel himself through a best-selling book and movie deal. So
wow,
I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, again,
so there's some definite profiteering.
Is it possible that he's doing it this way? Now, my interest in this comes from a person who I knew who wasn't selling a book. And what occurred in this situation was that they start talking to a little girl as they're dying.
Have you ever
Based on what I have understood from the family, was a little girl who had died, who was his sister, who his family had decided to never tell him about it. And when he says, who is that little girl? The family goes, what in the world? Well, granted, maybe he's having a hallucinogenic experience. Maybe. But the question was known by the people who were standing around. They knew what he was asking. So, do I believe that there is such a thing? Yeah, I do. I think that there is such a thing, and I think that this whole, and here we'll get off into the Pentecostal aspect. I've seen things that I don't think there's any possible way to explain, truthfully.
Well, like speaking in tongues. I mean, what is that? Is how do you get into a state where God is speaking through you? Is there like preparation, things you do? Like, what's that whole?
Yeah. Okay.
That one to me is like.
Yeah. The University of Pennsylvania did a study, CAT scan, on people speaking in tongues and found that it has a calming influence on the brain. And in fact, it doesn't even come from the language center of the brain, which means it's just gibberish. That's all it is. Okay. Or that there's something else going on. In other words, the language center is not manufacturing this. I know a good gentleman, and again, it's all hearsay to you all because you don't know who I'm talking about, who didn't believe in anything at all, goes into a prayer meeting where they're speaking in tongues, and he hears someone speaking in Polish. He walks up to the lady, and he said, "That was a beautiful prayer. I've never heard such beautiful Polish." And she looks at him and she says, "I don't know what you're talking about."
That's interesting. So you're telling me it's not coming from the Wernicke's area or the Broca's area, according to
the CAT scan of the University of Pennsylvania, it does not come from the language center of the brain.
Interesting.
So you're not even controlling it at all? You're not controlling it at all? It's totally involuntary?
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. So the answer is yes and no, which unfortunately is the answer. Okay. It is not originating from. Here's how I describe it. I sense it. I sense something welling up inside of me. Could be completely biochemical. Okay. I have the ability to control whether I open my mouth or not. But the words themselves are something that are spiritual and not merely the manufacturing of my brain. Can I control it through my mouth? Sure.
Are you ever interested in experiencing DMT? Like doing, let's say if we had a pharmaceutical company that made it purely, it was legal, you could go, let's say you go to like a different country or this country, maybe it becomes legal in this country. We're talking about legal terms. This is theoretical.
I got you.
Would you do DMT?
Sure.
To see, like, hey, what, maybe this is all DMT. Maybe what I'm experiencing near death is DMT.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I get closer to God.
It wouldn't convince me
You would
because, if it was legal, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Yeah.
All right.
I mean, it'd be like if you asked me, can I drink Mountain Dew? I mean, yeah.
Right.
Sure. But
On the same level, more or less, right?
Caffeine, DMT, heroin, whatever.
Yeah,
Let's party.
I mean, there's a lot of other factors to it. If you're saying to me, there are no side effects that we can find other than positive ones, yeah, sure.
Yeah. Plus,
Okay.
especially if it's led by a psychologist or someone that's actually there's benefits, psychological benefits and healing and all kinds of really cool things. Especially the
All sorts of
ayahuasca
things.
ceremonies they do. And
Yeah, I would not have a problem with it because if it were legal and it didn't have any, and it was studied enough to know whether it has a significant side effect that lingers, like LSD, okay. No, I don't want to try LSD. Okay. But if it didn't have any side effects and it were legal, would I try it as how should I say, understand it more? Sure. Yeah.
Interesting.
Is there? I mean, Cole, I could go ahead and ask, but is there anything that you would to promote or shout out or anywhere that?
Yeah, the shout out is for the boys' home for Anchor House, and I do really wish people would get behind this because.
Where can we send them? Is there a website? Is there a social media?
Great. www.anchor-house.org. It's www.anchor-house.org.
Is there any social medias?
Yeah. We do have social media. Unfortunately, we don't have anybody doing much with it.
Okay.
But we're on Facebook, Anchor House. There's a bunch of Anchor Houses out there, by the way. So you sort of have to cipher out which one is which. But the website is clear.
We'll leave the website in the description below. Dr. Joe Davis, it's been an absolute thrill to have you on. You're definitely our break from the norm, 100%, and we appreciate the
People
break
told
from.
me that all my life.
Well, hey, it's a good thing to be. It
it
really
up.
is. Keep it up. Like I said earlier, I appreciate you as a human being. You've been absolutely great. I'm so glad to hear you're doing more than just preaching the scripture or your philosophy. You're actually practicing it as best to your ability. And I want to thank you for changing these kids' lives, because they would be, statistically speaking, lost without you and the people that you work with. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, Cole, thank you so much. And Sean, Stephen, thank you. You have been most gracious. I've enjoyed our time together. You guys have been great. Really cool idea. I love the idea. As soon as I heard your title, Absurd Curiosity, I thought, oh, I'll fit right in.
Cool.
That's awesome. And
Nice.
that's
Awesome.
we try to have a warming, joking around podcast, so people can come on, and for most people, they're always, or at least scientists in our part, they always have like their professional business suit on whenever they come do these talk shows. We don't want that. We want you to come in, t-shirt.
Or all t-shirts.
Yeah, we'll just wear a t-shirt, have a beer, do whatever gets you relaxed, and let's just talk about it as friends, and make jokes while doing so. That's
I'm
what
totally
we do.
against joking. I'm absolutely against that thing.
100%.
You seem like it.
It should ban it. Ban it like alcohol in the 1920s.
Indeed.
Yes. So,
Well, thank you all so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Davis.
Good talking to you.
Yep. Thanks for joining us.
All right, y'all take care.
Bye, guys.